He's a Star Wars
So,
fan.
Brad, what noise does a TIE fighter make? Brad?
What noise does a TIE fighter make?
Yeah, give us your
None, it's in
best.
space.
Give us your best impersonation of a TIE fighter flying.
It doesn't make a sound. It's in space.
In the movies, it makes a sound. So,
Let's
I don't
hear
know how
yours.
it works. What?
Let's hear yours.
No, I want to hear yours first.
I don't do sound effects.
All right.
Jack does.
Dave is ready for a flood.
Although the actors are known to have, when they're holding their laser guns, to have gone pew 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 pew.
That is true, actually. I think, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think I actually heard that.
So did you sign on this meeting under Sam and not you, Jack? Because I tried to come in under you and it's just said you were in a meeting. I couldn't get in.
Well, that's odd. I don't know, honey. It's under
Well,
me.
you guys are showing up under Sam Bray right now.
I don't know why that happened, honestly.
Well, it's the video is, it's because the video is connected to my computer, but Jack is hosting it.
Yeah.
Oh.
The video and sound's just through my computer is all.
So I see Mr. Larson's coming to us from the East Coast at the.
No, he's in Kentucky, actually.
That's East Coast, Jack.
I'm sorry. You're a math teacher, not geography, are you?
I teach social studies too. I said East Coast. You said no, it's Kentucky.
Okay. We got another person.
Actually, it's Mount Ararat.
What mountain? I don't see a mountain.
He's on Mount Ararat. That's right. That's funny too. What happened?
This is
I'm gonna share.
Let's see if what else other people.
Hi, Patty, and hi, Steve Daniels.
Howdy.
Good to see you.
Hey, so while I have some 65-year-olds and over, what kind of Medicare Advantage plan? Did you get Plan G or did you get a Medicare Advantage?
Why don't you tell us? Because we're not sure what we want to do. You figure it out. Let us know.
Oh boy.
That was Vicky said, figure it out and let us know.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, you do all the work. Let us know.
Okay, Vicky. We'll charge you $1 when we figure it out.
That'd be cheaper than all those other guys.
It's worth
Brad
$1.
says Midwest, Southeast. Says nothing of East Coast.
Is it in the eastern half of the United States?
Yes.
Well, there you
East
go.
Coast is technically along the coast, East
This
Coast.
one seems to be very adamant. It says no.
Yeah, stick to math, okay?
Apparently it's a debate though. If people made a meme like that,
That's funny, actually.
that's funny.
It depends on what you mean by East Coast. I mean the eastern half of the United States.
There you go. We'll give you that. But it's in the, is it in the mountain time zone? I mean, it's in the Eastern time zone?
I don't know.
Or Central? It's Cincinnati. So whatever
Central?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
I don't know.
Ohio is.
Need to settle that one.
Ann Hoover's drinking her coffee or tea, something.
Decaf.
Decaf? Hey,
Yeah.
real stuff.
Oh.
Iced.
I said no.
Yeah, Sam manned up and said, no, I'm going to have water.
What's that? Sorry, I was responding to a text. Somebody said.
Oh, really? Can we have your undivided attention?
No. Hey, this is somebody that has not obeyed the gospel and could potentially. So,
Good. You
so
need to
it's
excuse
important.
yourself?
No.
Are they online?
No.
We have 5 people on YouTube. Welcome. I hope you're eating your dessert about now.
JC.
What he said.
He said fighter sounds are cool, but if I turn on the cam, you would get to see Jabba the Hutt.
That's
Back to
funny.
our Star Wars
Oh,
discussion.
back on that, huh?
Yeah. You're funny, JC.
We love you, JC.
JC, we love you.
What do you say now?
There you go, Sam. The original movie poster.
Oh, of Star Wars?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Original. Where'd you get that?
That was well, it's original to the 1970s. It's not from a movie house, but it's what they had up at the movie houses.
I didn't know you're such a fan. Way to go.
Somebody bought it.
I remember standing in line in downtown Salem with the line wrapped around the block in 1977. Was it
For the
I was
first
with
one?
you.
for the first one? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Patty
I
was
was
with
with
me.
you.
Patty was
Yep.
part of that crew.
Yep.
Wow.
It was Mark probably.
I don't know if Mark was there. Ron was there. I think Ron might have been there. I don't remember who all was there. I was there.
Capitol Theater, wasn't it?
Yep. Capitol Theater.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Very
that wow.
interesting.
Yeah, that's better.
Back before they had the mega movie plexes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember when I was had to go in front of the director see if I could get a part.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
In an
Were you
episode of-
trying out for Jar Jar Binks or what?
Yeah.
3 CPO or
Yeah. Yeah. He's probably one of like the aliens in that club scene.
there you go.
Wouldn't need any makeup. It'd be great.
Ooh, we're feeling good today.
Hey, you guys, the ladies need to take a minute and admire
What?
the mirror on Sunday that's in there, because of all the mirrors that have been hung in the world, this one by far is the most level and has the most perfect placement of any mirror that's ever been placed on a wall.
And it's guaranteed to make all of you look better.
There you go. Not that you need that,
And if it doesn't, talk to
Steve.
Daniels.
And Vernon, he helped. Or Vern.
Yeah, Vern Garrison.
We even
Well,
drug Sam in there to hold the mirror on the wall, and it didn't crush
Yeah, I
it.
was the supervisor.
How many times did you hit Vern's thumb?
Never did hit his thumb.
Oh.
You don't usually do that with a screw gun.
He did
Oh.
draw blood though.
Yeah, I did draw blood though. Blood was
You ever
sacrificed,
been using a
but not mine though this time.
screw gum? Screw gun, and it slips, and the bit drives into your hand and keeps turning. It hurts.
Try not to make that happen.
Yeah, it's not advisable.
You've
Trust
done
me.
that?
Oh, more than one.
So where is this new wonderful miracle mirror installed?
The miracle mirror. It's like Sam was going mirror, mirror on the wall.
Yeah.
Who's
It's
the
in
best
the-
feature of them all?
It's in the
one.
ladies' room.
You were in there?
Well, yeah.
Doors locked open, lights are on.
I was
guards,
helping
yeah,
hang
we were
the
in-
mirror.
Yeah. It's in the new remodeled women's bathroom, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what us guys look at? A shiny tin plate. That's our mirror.
Does it work?
Yeah. We still look as ugly as ever. Hey, there's Kevin and BJ Sipe. Hey, you ought to just move back, BJ, since you're here so long. BJ Sipe's back in the house.
Jeez. But he's muted.
He's muted. He can't help it. He's going to say something right about now. Here it goes. BJ, you're on.
Give us some words.
No,
of
he's
wisdom.
muted. He's not on.
What do you want?
We want words of wisdom.
Oh, I got this. So a preacher gets up and well, a visitor comes to church with his friend and he doesn't know anything about what's going on with services. So he is asking questions a lot. So they get up and the guy gets up to pray and he says, "What's happening? What does that mean?" He says, "Oh, it means it's time to pray. We always start our service with a prayer to God. And so that's what we're doing now." He says, "That's okay." And then they get ready to, the song leader gets up and he asks them to get their hymn books out. He says, "Well, what does that mean?" He says, "Well, now we're going to sing." And so, that's what we do every time we get together. We sing to God different hymns. He says, "Oh, okay." And then Lord's Supper, same thing. And then the preacher gets up and he gets up in the pulpit and he takes off his watch and he sets it down on the pulpit and opens his Bible to start preaching. He goes, he took off his watch. What does that mean? He says, nothing.
Get it.
You waited for all of that for nothing. We're going to do select speaker display. All right, now press the volume up there.
Oh, by the way, before I forget, Friday, South Salem Talk, Buck Barrett is going to be on with us. All right. From Seattle area. He's actually
Renton.
working with the church in Renton, Washington. So we're excited to have
Good for
him on.
him. Good for
I'm sorry?
him. Good for him. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Good for us for landing him.
Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah. Kevin and Erica. It's a house full of fun over there. I can tell. All right. We got just a few more minutes. Linda Murray, where are you? Say hi.
I'm here. Hello.
Oh, good to see you.
Hi, Linda.
I can hear you. There you are, in the dark almost.
No, I don't know what. There we go.
Oh,
There we
we
go.
go. Now we get to see your shining face. Good. So,
I think Dave Larson's gonna get sunburnt. If he doesn't put on sunscreen or get under some shade or something. It looks pretty sunny there. in
yeah, it
Kentucky.
does. Dave looks
outside the
pretty
yard.
nice. Lynn Fick is on
Yeah.
YouTube. She says, hello, all you great people. I think she was talking about you and me.
Yeah. I don't know.
Thanks, Lynn. Good to see you. I hope Jim's doing well.
Nope. There's Jack Barrett
All right. It's Jack B.
and Artie. Apparently, it's a good Jack.
The good Jack. On the evil Jack.
Oh, good. Connie Morris is on.
Who is?
Good.
Connie.
Hi, Tammy. How are you?
Connie.
Connie.
Oh, Connie. That's even better. Hi.
What do you think it was, Jack?
It's a tie.
It's a tie. All right. We have
Equally good.
12 people on YouTube. That's great. Connie Morris, how is his family over there?
We're doing okay.
Good.
Thank you for asking.
Uh-huh.
Lots of healing to do, but we're getting there.
Yeah. I bet. It takes a while.
I miss my mom.
Steve, you can attest to that. It takes a while, doesn't it?
For what?
Grieving.
Oh, yeah.
Because her mom died.
Yep, it does. And it's just when you think you're starting to get it, then it hits you again.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. A certain smell or a certain thought just brings it all back.
Right.
or you foolishly watch a movie about some dad dying, that really brings it back.
Yeah.
So,
I just got to go up to this is the plaque on my dad's just up at the Willamette National. Just got to see
Oh,
that.
yeah,
today.
Brad, you know,
Cool.
I forgot. Sorry. Yep, that's just the way of life. It's tough. That's why I'm so appreciative that it left for us in John that Jesus wept, because we know it's normal then.
You did such a beautiful job, Jack, with your talk.
Well, thank you. Didn't know really what quite to say, but it,
No, don't go on. Mosquitoes. No, that was a fly.
and it's okay. It's just a
Well,
fly.
Heather wants to leave because she thought it was a mosquito. Now she's leaving.
Yeah,
Oh. Okay, I'll move inside.
all right.
You guys need a reality TV show. I'd watch it.
Okay, we got 14 on YouTube. Jim Fick is doing well. Good. And it's okay.
Yep.
I wish everyone on YouTube would at least, make a message so we know who you are. I know Lynn's there. She said hi in the chat box.
Oh
You're all
man, Brian's at the
Ready for me to move in?
Mr. Brian Sipes over at that house too.
Oh,
Yes.
Hi, guys.
Oh, look, the dog's there too.
This is Kevin's dog.
took my spot.
Oh,
Nice.
No, you're fine. I'm just gonna kick your butt now.
All right, come over here. I'll sit over there.
Okay, you'll sit with your right.
You got baby?
That's a happening house there.
That's
Yeah.
right.
It is.
You got dogs, you got kids. Isn't it somebody's birthday today?
It
Ava came here.
Ava.
It's Ava's second
Ava, come here, baby
birthday.
girl.
Ava? Oh,
Yeah, BJ's
Here.
well,
daughter.
how nice.
Ava.
Hey, I stopped the video.
That's really nice. Okay, well, it's time for us to start. We have 14 on YouTube, and then we have a whole bunch, 16 on Zoom. So it's really nice to have everyone here. Again, before
Ava, tell everybody how old you are. Ready?
we're gonna mute everyone right now.
Oh, Ava's gonna say some words,
Oh,
but she just got muted. There we go. Now say it.
Ava, how old are you? 2 Avas.
2 Avas.
two Ava.
Two Ava.
That's
nice.
awesome. Happy
There's-
Happy
birthday.
birthday, Ava.
That's a proud uncle. Happy
Ha-
birthday.
Have her say
Proud
it.
grandpa, too.
Uncle. Yeah, that's a dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a dad.
All right.
Hey, have her.
Good.
Have her
It's
say
gonna
it
be
in
an
Greek and
interesting
Latin
class
now.
tonight, I can tell. All right, we're gonna mute everyone and unmute my host. Are you unmuted?
Yes, I'm unmuted because last time we went through a whole prayer
Yeah.
and nobody heard me.
All right. So Brad, we're gonna ask you to lead us an opening prayer in just a second. I just unmuted you, so you're good to go. But we're in 2 Timothy. We're gonna go through the section we started last week about some of the keys to suffering for Christ or enduring suffering. And so we're excited about the text here. It's just full of great information in verses 14 through 19. So glad you're here. Took time out from your busy day. It's so good to be able to do this. But Brad, if you're willing, why don't you lead us in a prayer, then we'll get started with our study.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time that we can gather together with the technologies you've allowed us to have, that we can in these times see and interact with one another. Please bless this study that we might learn from it and be encouraged by it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so as we said, we're going to open our Bibles to 2 Timothy chapter 2, and we're going to look at verses 14 through 19. And so I'm going to have Sam just read them all, and there's just 4 distinct sections here. And it's going to give us the key, the final key in our theme here of how to endure suffering. So we're going to read verse 14 through 19.
All right. So Paul writes to Timothy, remind them of these things and charge them before God not to quarrel about words, which does no good, but only ruins the hearers. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth. But avoid irreverent babble, for it will lead people into more and more ungodliness. And their talk will spread like gangrene. Among them are Hymenaeus and Philetus, who have swerved from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already happened. They are upsetting the faith of some, but God's firm foundation stands bearing this seal. The Lord knows those who are his. Let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. There you go.
All right, great. Now, it looks like sometimes these different verses are disconnected, but they really go together in a quite a compact theme or paragraph. And remember in chapter 2, in verse 1, we started this whole idea where he says, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. Then verse 3, suffer hardship. And so we've been looking at keys to how we can endure hardship in our following Christ. And the first one, he says, it's all about finding strength in the Lord, in the grace in the Lord. And then the second one we looked at last week was in verse 8, where he said, remember Jesus.
Yeah.
And so we have to have the right motive. If we're doing it just for ourselves or any other reason, we're going to wilt under the pressure of affliction. So he said, have the right motive, do it for Jesus. And so now we're looking at the last section where it's the right message. And that's what we're going to talk about, that if you believe in what we're preaching and what we believe in with all your heart, you'll be willing to die for it. And so he's going to talk about the useless worker, and then he'll talk about the approved worker. Then there's this section we'll talk about congregational gangrene, which is interesting. Then the firm foundation that holds us true to the Lord.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our approach. And you say, well, where'd he get all that? Verse 14 again, where he says, remind them of these things, charge them in the presence of God, not to wrangle about words, which is useless. It leads to the ruins of hearers. So it's all about the message. See, the message matters. If you don't have the right message, everything's, in vain, and it has no purpose. And we already saw in 1 Timothy, the gospel's always been under attack. People are perverting it. In chapter 4 of 1 Timothy, there's going to be doctrines of demons. Chapter 1, there's going to be men that want to be teachers, but they going to speak things about which they know nothing about. The message matters. And that's why Paul told Timothy in 1 Timothy 4, pay attention to yourself and to your teaching. And he's returning to that theme here. So we're going to look at these one by one. The first one, of course, is having making sure that we're not a useless worker. What does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, a useless worker, are you asking what that means just from a practical standpoint?
In this
world?
text,
in this,
first of all.
In this text. Yeah. So eventually he's going to talk about being an approved worker. But before he talks about that, that's kind of in contrast to what we have in verse 14. And so he again, just to read the text again, he tells Timothy to remind them of these things, which I think is reference to what was previously talked about. But he says, charge them before God not to quarrel about words, which does no good, but only ruins the hearers. So I think right there, we're really seeing what a useless worker of the Lord looks like. It's somebody that just quarrels about words, that makes an issue out of non-issues, and somebody that just whatever they touch, spiritually speaking, just turns to ruin. Really, what they do is they cause more damage than good, so to speak.
Now, have you ever worked with anyone or been around an employee, like you'd say, this guy's useless? How would that be
I mean,
in the physical world?
Yeah, I think that we've all had that experience, and I've had a lot of different jobs. And so worked with a lot of different kinds of people, and maybe we all have kind of an idea of what a bad worker looks like. But for me, it's like you see people where they're constantly, they're quick to find problems and very slow to point out solutions. They, whenever they mess up, they're quick to blame it on somebody else or to create some sort of excuse, whether it's because they're late or whatever. And they rarely focus or take responsibility for things they've done. They're the type of person that when you ask them to go do something, you come and you see they've messed it up, and you have to come behind them and fix it and do damage control. And so it kind of goes on and on and on. Yeah. In that way.
And if we see it in the physical world, we've all seen it in the spiritual world, sadly.
Yes.
And the thing that earmarks this person is they love to fight about words. And that's really what that a word in the Greek means when he says they charge them not to wrangle about words. What does yours say in the ESV?
Yeah, mine says not to quarrel about words.
The Greek actually is they're a word fighter. And they fight about words. They like to take issues and work them up people into a steam and they don't ever provide any solutions. Like you said, the elders got to come in afterwards and do damage control. They got to fix all the problems they made by just arguing about words. And so, and the church is constantly full of people that want to do this. And I don't know why, but it's probably because it's of Satan. And we have to get some examples of it. So what would be some examples of fighting about words, which is useless and just ruins the hearer?
Yeah, I think that you could probably break this up into a couple different categories. But the first one is just taking what the text says at face value, just arguing about words. So for instance, we have various issues that we come across, like the 1 cup issue, or one I was thinking about was in Jude. In the whole Bible, you have this one phrase where Jude uses, he talks about love feasts. He talks about people who are disrupting the faith and how they're reefs in your love feast. Well, people have created a whole doctrine and have divided over such things. There's people I know. My brother's currently worshiping somewhere in the United States at a congregation that right before he got there, they split over individuals serving, individuals with tattoos being allowed to serve on the Lord's table, things of those natures. And so, yeah, we're really eager to find anything and everything to argue about, aren't we?
You know, you talk about the Lord's Supper
Mhm.
and one cup. Even in the Restoration, it was Luther. There was almost a division, and it stymied the Restoration for a while because when it said, Jesus said, "This is my body,"
Mhm.
there's a big fight over, is that literal
Mhm.
or is that figurative? And it actually caused heated debates and caused some schisms to take place just over that issue. Now we have baptism, for example. Have you ever had someone just say, well, you know, sprinkling is as good, or pouring or dipping is, oh, well, you don't have to be immersed. And they want to wrangle about just the definition of baptism. And Paul says to Timothy, don't go there, because when you look up the word, for example, baptism, it was never translated into English. The Greek word just simply means to immerse or submerse. And so if someone wants to argue if sprinkling's okay, don't even fight and argue, because it's a worthless effort, and it's only going to cause anger and tempers to flare.
So when I said there's kind of two ways to look at it, the first one is kind of the one I was talking about, where you're arguing about the meaning of words and maybe giving more significance to a word than it should have. But then there's also the other side of it as well, where we're talking about like what you're talking about, where there is a word and we're even certain of the fact that we have the right definition, such as baptism, right? Baptism means immersion. So quarreling about words in this instance, it kind of gets to the point when somebody's coming from a different paradigm and they just are insistent that baptism means sprinkling, and we're insistent that baptism means immersion. The question is, how long do we argue about that before we just say, you know what, we're coming from a different place here and we need to walk away from the conversation? I don't know.
And that's good. And it doesn't mean that words don't matter, because, for example, Galatians chapter 3, when Paul makes the whole argument about when God made the promise to Abraham that in thy seed all nations are to be blessed, he makes a whole argument just on the plurality of that word. He said, and to seed, not seeds, mainly Christ. He's saying that Jesus is the single seed of Abraham. And so words are important. We don't want to argue and wrangle about things that don't matter.
And let's not forget that Satan only needed one word, just one word in the original sin of that Eve committed, right?
You shall not die.
You shall not surely die, right? Just one word. So it's not that words aren't important. We want to have the right words, but the question is, to what extent do we argue over words?
So how would you know if you're wrangling and fighting? I think we talk about the end game when you're all said and done. In other words, if at the end of your discussion, you are left more divided than united, you've been fighting about words. If people have less faith and have doubts and they're troubled in their faith, we've been fighting about words. If it doesn't convince and bring people to Christ, but actually pushes them away from Christ, we've been fighting about words. And it happens all the time. About 6 days of creation, each day, is it literal or not? In the big picture, does that matter about your salvation if you got everything right about the creation? I would answer no. Can we learn about it? Yes. But we can't make issues about things that really we know sometimes very little about.
And I think it says Marisa, but I think it's Jeff. He brings up a good point, which I agree with. I think it is more about those of like faith, not those of unsound doctrine. We don't argue, we discuss. And I agree. I think that is Paul's central point here, that it's how we converse and deal with issues among ourselves, but it also spills out into dealing with people who come from a different faith as well.
And the reason Paul says don't, because it leads to the ruin of the hearers. That word ruin is a Greek word which we get the English word catastrophe from. It's actually the Greek word. How would you say it?
catastrophe is good enough for me. That's pretty much
That's
how it
what it
looks.
says.
Yeah. When you,
In other words, it means to overturn. And when they translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, when they're talking about the overthrowing of Sodom and Gomorrah, they use this word. It was a catastrophe. It was overturned upside down. And he said, that's what wrangling of words does. It ruins Christians' faith and destroys them. Now, is that a good worker or a useless one?
yeah.
Well, what's the solution then? What's the antidote to wrangling about words? Well, that's our next verse. So let's look at it in verse 15. This verse is power packed with lots of things. We'll just skip this quote here from 1 Timothy 6 for right now. Go ahead. Why don't you talk about it?
Yeah. Verse 15, be diligent to present yourself approved to God as a workman who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth. So I love this because here Timothy as a preacher, he's being told, number one, yeah, you need to charge people to do something, which is don't quarrel about words. Don't get into pointless discussions that ruin hearers. But then he also puts and points the camera, so to speak, on Timothy. He puts the spotlight on Timothy. And so we kind of have a habit as Christians to focus, on what everybody else is doing. But Paul doesn't give room for us or for Timothy, especially in this context, to do that. He says, yeah, you need to charge people to do this, but you need to focus on yourself as well. And really, that's where it's always going to start, isn't it?
I love that because we like to point to others what they're not doing, what should be done in the church. But yes, he puts the focus. You be diligent. Yours says what?
Do your best, which is spidato. It's that idea of doing your best, giving your every effort. Yeah.
I was impressed with every word in this verse. It is power packed. And I'm just going to list them all. Be diligent. That's the NAS. Present yourself. We'll talk about that. Approve to God. We're looking for approval from him and nobody else. A workman. That's what we are. And then not ashamed, then handling accurately. That's a big word. We'll talk about it. And then we just don't want to pass over. It's the word of truth. What does that all mean? How about this idea of presenting?
Yeah. Presenting yourself, which I believe it's also used in the context of Christ presenting the church, right? The bride of Christ being presented.
All right.
So
in Ephesians chapter 5, he's presenting the church as his bride to himself.
Yeah. So it's a word that's got a lot of meaning behind it, but he talks about, presenting yourself as an approved worker of God. But I always think about it as, in terms of when I was working for Costco, there's, it comes around and we used to do a review, an employee review it was either 6 months or every year.
I hate those.
Yeah, I know. And that's kind of what this whole idea kind of reminds me of, is that you are standing before somebody that you answer to. You're standing before your master. And are you going to stand as one that's approved? And we'll talk about these words as well. Or are you going to be standing before that person as somebody who deserves to be fired, who doesn't deserve the responsibility that they have been entrusted with? So this is kind of what I think about when I see this word, that how are we going to stand before God, or how are we presenting ourselves before God? We can worry about everybody else, but how am I presenting myself before God?
I think that captures it, because when you're before the boss, you have no one else to back you up. You're there alone, and each of us has to give an account of ourselves to God. And that's what he says, Timothy, you're going to have to present yourself before God. You're going to stand before him. And that's a beautiful thing, but it's also scary. It's a fearful thing to stand before the living God.
It reminds me of Peter a little bit at the end of John, talking to Jesus, and Jesus is basically telling Peter he's going to have to die. And, he points to who I believe is John. What about this guy? And that doesn't matter. It's about us and our relationship with God. And it has to start with us, with every individual. Yeah.
And then the next word he says, present yourself approved. Now that's going to be contrasted with being ashamed. And so let's deal with both those words at the same time.
Okay.
The word ashamed is literally comes from a word that meant disfigured. So if someone was disfigured in an accident or fire, they might kind of cower because they don't want to be seen. They're a little embarrassed. So then it became generally known as just someone that is ashamed for whatever reason in their life. Maybe their morality, some things they've done, their social class, whatever. But here it's the same word that Jesus said, if whoever's ashamed of me on this earth, I'll be ashamed of as well. And so he says, we don't want to be ashamed when we stand before God in our review, if you would, but we want to be approved. And that word approved is the same word that is used in 1 Peter when you're tested by fire and you're shown to be pure and you're shown to be genuine. It's a beautiful word, but it goes back to the idea you got to be diligent. That's a lot of energy and a lot of haste because this is serious, because this gospel is God's plan to save people. You have been entrusted with this great gift. That was chapter 1. And you got to treasure it and let God work through you. And you got to do it in such a way that you're handling accurately the word of truth. What the idea of a workman? You know, do we see ourselves as workmen, or is this just a casual experience in a social club in the Lord's church?
Yeah. And is it, do I come to church and expect people to labor for me, or am I looking for ways that I can contribute and serve and labor for others, and especially for God at the end of the day?
I think it came up in your teen class about when sometimes people say, well, the church should be doing this, or why isn't someone doing this for the kids, or why aren't we doing? And I've always thought, if you have the ability to see what needs to be done, then maybe God's asking you to be the one to do it, because you're the one that notices it. And I have to confess, when I was younger, I'd get together with some friends. Oliver was one of them. And we would just dissect the church and lay it on a table. Well, this isn't going on. The elders aren't doing this, and more people ought to be avenged. And we would just lay out all the problems in the church and just kind of dissect and lay it bare like we're operating on it. Then we go, boy, aren't we spiritual? Because we can see all the things the church ought to be doing and what it's not doing. Then we realized later, how sad is that? How sad is if we can see it, then God's asking us to do something about it. Not just to show what's wrong, but we're supposed to be workmen. Those are laborers. And Jesus said, what, the fields are white for harvest. Pray that God might send forth labor. Same word that's used here. A workman. That's what God's looking for, is people that are willing to because they're so grateful and they're strong in the grace of Christ and they're doing it for Jesus. They'll work even if they have to die for him. What's this idea about handling accurately?
Yeah, handling accurately, and in the Greek it means to cut straight. In fact, you have a quote that deals with this. I don't know if you want to read that or not. From Barclay.
Yeah, it's interesting. Barclay, when he was talking about this, that the word can mean to the Greeks one of three things. It was driving a straight road across country. In other words, you want to cut it straight. When you were plowing a field, you'd plow a furrow across the field. You want it straight. Or even a mason, when he's cutting stone, he would cut and square the stone so that it would fit properly in the structure of the building. And so it's the whole idea of cutting things straight, you know, to get to the right goal and not going swerving to one direction or the other. I thought, and Paul, being a tent maker, would understand this word, because he would cut animal skins. And if he didn't cut the pieces out correctly when he went to sew them together, well, it just wouldn't work out. And so he had to cut things straight. Now, why would he use this word when it comes to the gospel or the word of truth?
And just before I talk about that, the other kind of analogy I'm thinking in this is a lot of times when you talk about cutting something straight in this world, like I think about when I used to mow the lawn for dad. Dad wanted like perfect straight lines. And if the weirdest thing would happen, like you do the first line, right, when you're mowing the lawn and you think it looks straight. And so you use that line as your standard, and then you use the line after it and the line after it. And then all of a sudden you realize each line is getting more and more crooked because the first one wasn't as straight as you thought it was, and you never corrected it. And that is kind of what happens when we talk about false doctrine. It it's not immediately obvious.
Mm.
It's just little by little, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you see how far away that you got from the truth. And so we need to handle accurately. We need to cut straight the word of God. And so going back to what we were saying before, you know, Paul tells us not to quarrel about words. And I see in the chat, we're talking about baptism, all those things. Yes. Like when we're talking about baptism, we need to make sure that we are handling God's word accurately. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to find ourselves eventually swerving from the
And
truth.
we'll arrive at a place other than God intended to
Yeah.
us to arrive at. We'll
Yep.
be off the goal,
Mhm.
and that's dangerous.
Mhm.
And so this is an approved worker in contrast to the useless
Yeah.
worker, because he takes it so serious because he realized he's dealing with the word of truth. Now, I'll be honest, when I first looked at this, oh yeah, we all know what the word of truth is. You know, Paul says in Colossians 1, it's the gospel, it's the word of truth. But let's just stop and pause. And what is truth, the word of truth? You know, one person described it that this truth is the it's the manifestation of that which was hidden, a hidden reality. And I'll just show you, we'll actually share a screen here with the first one we're going to share, is that we used to do this all the time before when you go to a trial and you're a witness, they'd have you put your hand on the Bible and they said, you swear to tell the whole truth, all the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. So as God is your witness, you're swearing to reveal something to the jury and the judge about what you know to be true. And we find in Mark's account where that woman touched the hem of Jesus' garment, and Jesus said, someone touched me. And she realized she was discovered, and she fell at his feet and said she revealed the truth to him. She told him everything. And she uses that word. She spoke the truth to him. Now, that's what we're talking about, revealing what actually happened. And that's what God has given. We would know nothing about spiritual things. We'd know nothing about heaven or hell or how to get there if God didn't reveal it to us. This is his testimony. And Jesus, by watching him, he's full of grace and truth. That's why he said, I am the way, the truth. And he said, if you abide in my words, you will know the truth. We have to then share this accurately, because if we don't, we're going to be misrepresenting things that have been hidden for centuries, and we only know because God's revealed them to us. And so it's very powerful when we have the privilege and the great responsibility of handling accurately the word of truth.
Yeah.
With that being said, here's a quote, and you guys, you get to do a quiz here. Everyone gets to weigh in. Truth is so obscure in these times, and falsehood is so established that unless we love the truth, we can't know it. Now, here's my question. Was this written or spoken in the 1600s, the 1800s, the 1900s, or 2020 in our political climate?
Shouldn't Brad know the answer to this one?
Yeah, Brad might know the answer to this one.
Come on, Brad.
Anybody? I'll tell you right here. It was Blaise Pascal in the 1600s. Isn't that amazing? That even in his time, falsehood was so established. It was part of society. People just lie and tell truths. It was written on, it was in the internet. No, they'd probably say what?
I don't know. Didn't live back then.
They honestly didn't have an internet.
Yeah.
So, and that's exactly what it is today. And if it wasn't for workers and us as Christians to speak the truth carefully, we'd live in a dark, dark, dark world. All right, with that being said, he's going back then to the contrast.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting how what he started talking about in verse 14 is again almost re-emphasized in verse 16, where he tells us to avoid quarreling over words, but then he re-emphasizes the importance of handling God's word accurately. But then he again tells us, but avoid worldly and empty chatter, for it will lead to further ungodliness. And I like how my ESV puts that. It'll lead to more and more ungodliness, because it just kind of compounds, doesn't it? When we talk about things and make issues over non-issues, and when we introduce, a little bit of false doctrine, it compounds, and we get further and further away. And verse 17, we kind of see how that works in the church and how it impacts the church. He says, and their talk will spread like gangrene. Among them are Hymenaeus and Philetus, men who have gone astray or have swerved from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already taken place, and they upset the faith of some. So he talks about how, and you use the phrase congregational gangrene. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's interesting because in verse 14, wrangling about words will upset. That means overthrow. So then he says in chapter 2, cut it straight. All right. Now he goes back to this worldly and empty chatter, and it says it leads, and that word leads means to cut a path like through a jungle. It'll lead to what? Well, a place you don't want to go to, more ungodliness. And this godliness and their talk, it's like rotting flesh. That's what the gangrene is. Yeah. And I just remember from old Westerns and war movies, when someone would get foot rot or they get shot and get infected and there wasn't antibiotics, they'd have to put a piece of wood in their mouth, or they'd bite a bullet and they'd have to cut their leg off. Because that rotting flesh, if you didn't sever it, it would creep up and just kill the person entirely. Mm-hmm. And he says that's what's happening with worldly or secular chatter, and that is useless. And it just destroys people's faith.
Yeah. And you really see the importance. Hymenaeus and Alexander are mentioned in 1 Timothy, and Paul talks about how he's handed these men over to Satan.
Yeah. And
that's interesting because he uses that same kind of language in talking about the sinner in 1 Corinthians 5, to hand him over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that his soul
might be saved.
Yeah.
Right?
So his soul might be saved. You see the importance of, marking and withdrawing, right? The conversation we never like to talk about, and especially in regards to false teachers. If somebody isn't speaking truth, we see the importance, the spiritual value in cutting that person off, because that person is like a rotting corpse, or not a rotting corpse, but a rotting limb. And their teaching it's spreading like gangrene. They're already spiritually dead. And those who are still joining themselves to that individual risk the chance of becoming spiritually dead themselves. And so again, we see that kind of playing out here, and Paul describing that in verse 17. And he gives those two examples of Hymenaeus and Philetus. Right. Yeah.
And the words are all so picturesque. The word avoid, I don't know what it says in the ESV, but the New American Standard, avoid worldly chatter.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm avoiding sugar, but I'll have it every time I really want it. No, avoid means walk a clear pathway around it. Yes. And so we were talking about this earlier. You've ever seen a rattlesnake, and you had experience with one?
Yeah.
I'll tell mine first. You can share your one. Yeah. But once I was taking my two dogs, we were hunting. I had a shotgun, and we were by a narrow path, and there's a big outcrop rock, and I walked by it, and as soon as I walked by it, I hear, and I go, oh no, I'm dead, because I was feet away from it. It was under this rock. And so I ran as fast as I could, and then tied up my two dogs with my belt because I had no leash, and then went back, and sure enough, there was this big rattle, and it was at a den. And so I pointed my shotgun and shot it, and there was 6 rattlesnakes in there, little baby ones and a bigger one and the mother one. Well, when you see a rattler, do you just get close as you can, or what do? You make a clear path as far as you can get from it.
Yeah. So that's your story.
Yeah. What was yours?
Mine was, I was in California when I first got there to train to be a preacher, and I went hiking with somebody, and I saw a rattlesnake in the middle of the path, and I thought, cool, I've never seen a rattlesnake before. So I pulled my cell phone out to try and get real close to it to take a picture. And my friend who was with me, he grabs me by the shoulders and almost uses me as a human shield and just pushes me like we take this wide berth around the rattlesnake and avoid it altogether. But yeah, it's
He put you in harm's
yeah,
way.
I know. I didn't have the same respect, but like what you're saying, you know, the same way you would react to seeing a snake in the grass is the same way we ought to avoid, you know, empty chatter. And the thing about that, the reason why we need to be reminded of that is because we like to talk about things that just in the grand scheme of things don't matter. Right?
I don't know. We have an affinity, don't we, for
Yes.
controversy.
Yeah.
And it's not just Christians, it's everyone in the world, you know, political controversy, COVID-19. We love arguing about sports, who's the best team.
Yeah.
And that's why there's protests. And why do we view and watch all this stuff? Because I don't know, there's something about us. We like the drama of controversy, and it inflicts the church as well.
Yeah.
And he says, don't go there because it'll just destroy and upset the faith. In other words, rather than building them up and bringing them closer to Christ, you're going to ruin them. And that's a shameful workman, not one that's approved of God.
Yes.
I had a thought. Marissa said, that's probably Jeff. There's way more disciplined verse in the New Testament than on the Lord's Supper. Good point. Yeah. And
true.
Titus 3:10 is the one I was going to talk to. Reject the factious man after a first and second warning. Yeah. There's no room for him.
Yeah.
Because they're so destructive, always complaining, never solving. And we always have to do damage control after they're done, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
But lest you think, man, is there any surety that the church is going to survive amidst all these false teachers? And these Christians were undergoing persecution, and the church had to go secret after a while. Is there any assurance that we can know that if we hang on to the word of truth, that we're going to survive?
Yeah. And you got to put yourself in the shoes of, you know, Timothy and those who were worshiping with Timothy, that you apparently got these guys, you know, Hymenaeus, Philetus, maybe Alexander as well, that was mentioned in First Timothy, that are gaining this following. And, you know, they don't know how things are going to play out. They don't know how history is going to play out. They don't have this New Testament, and they're not able to live in 2020 and see that the church is still here. And so it's almost like in the minds of the believers back then, are they thinking that Christianity is evolving? Is it taking a new shape? They're seeing that it's upsetting the faith of some, but Paul's going to offer us words of encouragement here in verse 19. And that's that, nevertheless, the firm foundation of God stands, having this seal: the Lord knows those who are his, and everyone who names the name of the Lord is to abstain from wickedness. What's the firm foundation?
Well, first of all, that's a good question.
Yeah.
You know, but the nevertheless is in contrast to all the uncertainty of these useless teachers and this worldly chatter. This foundation's firm. Now, there's lots of thoughts. It's the truths of what he just said. It's the believers. But we've already seen in our study in First Timothy, there's a foundation, a pillar and the support of the truth, and it's the church. Remember in First Timothy chapter 3 and verse 15, which you all memorize, right? Paul said, I'm writing these things, hoping to come to you before long, but in case I'm delayed, I'm writing these things that you might know how you ought to behave yourself in the church of the living God, which is the pillar and the support of the truth. And of course, what? 1 Corinthians 3, there's no other foundation which has been laid other than Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So we have a foundation that we stand on, and it's Jesus and it's church and it's our relationship with him, that Jesus said the gates of Hades will not prevail. So in other words, there's all this controversy and spiritual warfare, but we have a firm foundation, and it's of God, and it stands, and it's got an interesting seal on it, and a placard, if you would, that describes it. The first one is
and to your point too, sometimes that this word seal can mean inscription. And I was reading historically, they would make these buildings, and on the cornerstone, they would, you know, put some sort of inscription on there, you know, to state the significance or the reason or, you know, the cause of the building being there. And so, you know, the church's firm foundation we stand on, it has this inscription, this seal on it. And it says, the Lord knows those who are his.
I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
If you ever wondered, like, Does God know I exist? Does
Mhm.
God care? And
Or does God recognize all the falsehoods that are going on in the world
right.
too?
He knows, and he makes a clean discernment between the sheep and the goats. Those are approved, those are useless. He knows those are his.
We have Paul I think pretty much verbatim quotes an Old Testament passage here in Numbers 16, right? In
Mhm.
verse 5. And if you're not familiar with that passage, that's when you have Moses and you have some people from the tribe of Levi, the party of Korah, right? And they're kind of emblematic in the New Testament of false teachers. We see Korah pop up in Jude as well. They rise up in rebellion against Moses and basically telling Moses, you know, why are you exalting yourself above ourselves? It's really, it's irreverent
Mhm.
babble is what it is. And they challenge him and they get this uprising and they're almost trying to cause a spiritual revolution. And
So there's a question: who is the real man of God? Who are his people?
who are God's people? And that was the question they were dealing with in Israel, well, among the Israelites, that is, in number 16, verse 5. And Moses' response was this: tomorrow morning, the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to himself, even the one whom he will choose. He will bring near to himself. And what happened to Korah and those who followed him?
Well, Moses said, to make it clear, let the ground open up. If God is for me, let the ground open up and swallow you. And that's exactly what happened. And God chose and showed that the seal still exists. The Lord knows those who is. And I just encourage everyone, God knows who you are. You have a name written. It's your own, you know, it says that in book of Revelation. And it's not a secret name, but God knows who you are. And your name is written in the book of life. And if we're just true to his word and we're diligent, we don't have to worry about suffering and what the world says. How about the second part?
Yeah. Everyone who names the name of the Lord is to abstain from wickedness, which I think really is going to flow into what we'll talk about moving forward, won't
Now,
it?
you might think that's a funny seal.
Yeah.
Like you could say, I am God's people, or one of his person. That's a nice seal. But everyone who names the Lord is abstains for wickedness. That's kind of a funny seal, but it describes the kind of people we are. And as you said, it'll be a transition into next week's talk about how we can be meat or useful for the master's sake by being a vessel of honor. And it's a wonderful discussion, but we'll just go there next week.
Yeah. And I would say too, to go back to the first part of this verse, and that this whole idea the Lord knows who are his, it's comforting in two respects. It's comforting knowing that, you know, God sees us, like, that's kind of what you mentioned. He sees us, he recognizes we belong to him. But it also takes weight off our shoulders because I don't need to worry as much about exacting judgment and condemnation on every single false teacher, such as, you know, Hymenaeus and Philetus. Maybe that was something they were worried about. Like, are these guys going to be dealt with? Is all we're going to do just let these guys walk and we're going to have nothing to do with them? That's all we're going to do. But they took comfort. They were to take comfort in knowing that the Lord knows those who are his, and that they might have fooled some of their own and they might have disrupted the faith of some of their own, but there's this firm foundation and the Lord knows who are his, and he'll deal with it in the end.
He said, vengeance is mine.
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing to fall in the hands of the living
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah.
Well, good. We're going to open everybody up. I hope this helps because it's all about having the right message, you know, and remind them of these things because it really does matter. And so I hope, like I say, it helps us, gives us another key to suffering because we're speaking the truth.
Yeah.
And it's true. It always will be true. And so we have nothing to worry about. It's not going to change.
And I want to clarify a statement made earlier because I saw that it was being talked about. When I talked about not arguing,
because
I hear ourselves in the background. Somebody's got to mute YouTube.
Remind them of these things.
I think it's Jeff and Marisa have YouTube going.
As I say, it helps us.
There it is.
Key to suffering because we're having. I'll mute. It's true. It always will be true. We have nothing. I muted him there. Go ahead.
There we go. There's a delay. Okay. No, I was just saying that earlier I was talking about, you know, at what point when you're arguing with somebody over the meaning of the word baptism, do you walk away? And I do think there's a point where you walk away, because you can go be blue in the face telling somebody that baptism means immersion. But if they're insistent that baptism means sprinkling, you can show them every single verse, you can bring up the lexicons, but at some point you have to walk away. And I had this experience with Heather. Actually, we studied with World Mission Society, which is this really weird religion.
Cult.
But they're under the impression, they said, sometimes in the Bible, bride does mean church. But in Revelation, at the end of Revelation, when you see the bride being presented, it's the actual wife of God. And that was their understanding, that this verse is referring to an actual literal bride of God, and it's going to be his wife. And we talked to them, and that was their understanding of what bride meant there. And so how long do I argue with them before I walk away? So that's what I meant when I say, obviously we do our due diligence. We try to point people to truth. We try to explain to them the scriptures. But even with outsiders, it gets to a point over doctrinal issues where you have to walk away, because, arguing when you're blue in the face, that's not going to win somebody over either. So anyways.
No, and
that's what I was getting at there when I said that.
I appreciate
earlier.
that. That's a good clarification. All right. How about everybody else? Ann Hoover, what do you got to say?
Okay. I'm really glad for this lesson, because I have this warfare going on in my head, being around people who are expressing religious opinion that is false. But where do you start? And then the admonition to be swift to hear, slow to speak, and the lesson tonight where, not to argue over words, and, picking your battles in the climate we live in, I think sometimes gets pretty tricky. And I think I'm going to continue wrestling with it as long as I'm drawing breath. And praying about it, because I don't want to be in a position where I'm confronted with something and have an opportunity to say something, and I either say the wrong thing and drive them off, or fail to say anything and don't stand up for the Lord. So it's
that's where we pray for wisdom.
Yeah.
And sometimes we got to stop convincing and start converting people to Christ. There's a difference between convincing the Bible's true, convincing, this is what this verse means. And that's all academic, and it deals with the head. We're trying to convert people to Jesus.
Yeah.
And that starts with the word, yes, but it has to get in the heart, and we got to win people to Christ and convert. Conversion's a big difference. And so I've been frustrated too, trying to convince, and we debate and argue. Then it becomes the wisdom of men against their wisdom. No.
Yeah.
Let's just ask God to put people in our paths that we can convert to Christ.
And that process kind of looks different depending on the person you're trying to convert, because, like if you're in the South, you're dealing with people coming from different denominations. So you're not so much trying to like win them as far as believing that Jesus is the Christ, but you're trying to help them understand the Bible more consistently. But here we're really dealing with people that are coming from, most of the time we're dealing with people that are coming from no religious background at all. And so where do we start with those people? Do we start by convincing them about our views on, instruments and worship, or do we start with Christ and then go from there? Of course.
That's a good example. You'll lose them if that's our lead instrumental music or something like right worship. Like what?
Not that that's not an important issue. It's just that's not where you start with somebody that's coming from no religious background.
Because the only thing we convert them to Christ, all that will follow, because they will be a worker for the Lord, a servant of the Lord.
Yeah.
Good. Mr. Daniels.
That was a good class. You guys did a good job. The worldly pattern, it's the Jewish word, I think, the heathen, the saying all those bad things, just don't do it and try to avoid it. That's what I got tonight from what you're talking about, like the rattlesnake. Kind of helps with my idea about looking at the news. They're trying to faithfully report every evil thing they said.
Yeah.
I need to make sure I don't get it because I don't want to hear it, but I need to be aware of it. Harmless as doves, but wise as serpents. We
Right.
know what's going on, but I don't need to bathe in it. So I really like
Yeah.
that part.
Yeah, and aware of it, obviously, to the extent where it's not influencing you, and
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a good thought, because even this text where he says they were teaching the resurrection already taken place, we were trying to, what was that controversy about? Why did they even say that? And what kind of resurrection? What are they talking about? But they understood, because it was their issue of their day, and it means nothing really to us. Like, what do you mean the resurrection already took place? How could they even say that?
Yeah.
But it was a real heresy at that time.
unless
So-
BJ knows what was being referred. BJ, what was being referred to when you have the right answer? Oh, you're muted. There we go. What was that?
I think you nailed it, Sam.
Oh, I nailed it. That was Jack that said it. I didn't say anything.
I said, we don't
So,
know.
Yeah.
we were discussing that here, what that might mean, and of course, there's the doctrine of AD 70, but that doesn't even apply to what that could possibly be referring to, because that's something completely different. So, the study I've done on this is that perhaps there was a discrepancy because of the people that had come up out of the graves when Jesus died and was raised, and then came into the city, and that many people perhaps argued that that was the resurrection that had been prophesied, because look, here are people who actually were raised from the dead.
Mhm.
And so this is what was said, and so there will not be another one. That's the only connection I could possibly make, but I don't know of any other thing that they could possibly be referring to.
But it's interesting. If we were there that day, we'd understand fully. That's what's
Right.
it.
Right.
You suggested too, you were reading that some said when we were raised spiritually at our baptism with Christ. So that's the resurrection. There is no future resurrection bodily. And
Yeah, so
some
it's
might have made it that.
Almost like a metaphorical resurrection, and I guess what I was reading is in the culture, right? So now we're just really off in the woods assuming things, but in the culture of the Greeks and where Timothy was located there in this letter, evidently, a literal, physical resurrection would have been very absurd and hard for a Greek to get behind. And so there's some that think maybe they're trying to soften the message by saying, well, it's a spiritual resurrection, right?
And then that happened today. People soften the gospel. There's no hell. You just have soul sleep.
Yeah.
And so they want to argue and wrangle about words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Good. Mr. Larson, you got anyone to share since you're there before the ark?
Yeah, well, you talked about baptism in your analogy there, and not to wrangle over words with one who talks about sprinkling and being baptized. I've never had that problem when I'm speaking to people, because I look at the Greek word and it's baptismal, which is immersion. Right. And then the other passages where he says you must be buried with him. You cannot be buried by being sprinkled.
Right.
Yeah.
You just cannot do it. I don't know how you do that. But with those that I've taught the gospel, they don't have a problem with that. And so I've never had them fight back to say on the sprinkling.
Yeah.
But I like the part about this empty chatter. It does no good. And I like what Steve had to say about that. But as preacher, as you know, you have to stay up with the current events. You need to know what's going on, because you have to have the ability to defend against what's coming against the church. And so you have to know what's happening in our society and what people are doing, and be able to contradict those things that are harmful. Right. And so you have a knowledge of it, but like Steve said, you don't immerse yourself in it, but you have to have knowledge of it.
Yeah. And that's true. We have to be aware, but not necessarily engage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
that's why I'm off Facebook now. I don't have Facebook anymore. I got rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't blame you.
I'm serious. It's been 2 months without it. I think going on 3, but I don't miss it at all. And I don't see the negativity, and it's so good to be off of Facebook.
I'm just glad to be done with it. I haven't been reading Facebook for years, and my hair's starting to grow back. So it's really good. I hear, amen, Dave. I agree that.
Yeah. And dealing with outsiders too. Remember, Peter tells us that, to be ready to make a defense for the hope that is in you, and people stop there, but we're told to do it with gentleness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's always important to remember, that sometimes like we're just ready to like hit people over the head with this. And but that, how many people, how often does that work? Right?
Never.
And then and don't be thinking you got to answer every question, because there's a principle: truth pushes out darkness, light pushes out darkness. And if we just teach the truth of what it is, it answers all their questions. We don't have to deal with every objection. Just teach the truth, and it's going to solve most of the problems for us. Yeah. And I just really trust that. Just teach the truth.
So as a
what it does say.
As a preacher, Jack, have you reached the point that when somebody asks you a question, you no longer ever have to say, I don't know, when they ask you a question? Yeah, exactly. No, you have to say that sometimes as a Christian.
Right. Yeah, exactly right.
There's nothing wrong with that. Like we were talking earlier about, and thinking of examples of quarreling over words. Like, what about when people say, what about the guy who is on his way to get baptized and he gets in a car wreck before he's able to get baptized? Or what about the guy who lives on a desert island and never even has a chance to hear the gospel? What about them? What happens to them? And you want to know what my answer is?
Yeah, I leave it to God.
God will do the right thing. That's what I do know.
There you go.
Yeah. And there is water, and you did hear the gospel. What are you going to do?
Yes.
That's the only question.
Yeah.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
They call them vain speculations in First Timothy. So,
Yeah.
And it upsets all sorts of people because you can't answer them because they're unanswerable. Appreciate that. Mr. Barrett.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. No, I really enjoyed the class. I like how you take a section of the scriptures and go into it in detail and what the words mean and the thoughts.
Good.
And these thoughts tonight are something that we know really in our hearts, but being human, we forget.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important in these Bible studies that we go over this and just, refresh our minds for the right thing to do.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that, because I'm sure Timothy, a lot of what Paul's saying, they've discussed before, especially like what you just said, right? I mean, Timothy is a preacher. He knows he's seen how Paul deals with people as a preacher and was taught by Paul, watched him firsthand.
Yeah.
So he's being reminded of things that he already knows.
It's interesting because verse 14, where we started, says, remind them of these things. They already know them, but he has to keep saying them over and over again. Yeah, I appreciate that, Jack.
Right.
Yeah.
I would also like to publicly thank Steve Daniels and his helper, Vern Garrison, for mounting the full-length mirror in the women's bathroom. They did a great job. The women are going to appreciate it. Now they can make sure they look their best before they so, great job, Steve.
Thanks.
Did you tell him about the one you broke, or you had to get another one real quick?
I was so careful with that thing. I had it clothes, blankets. I thought, please don't break it. Please don't break it.
Please don't break it. Well, we appreciate it.
But
And
we had
Vern,
Sam
if
helping
Vern's
us too,
listening.
Jack.
Yeah.
We had Sam helping us, and he did a great job.
I was just a supervisor.
No,
That's
we
all
had
I was.
it
A
up
little more to
against
the
the
right.
wall.
No, back to the left. A little more to the right.
Well, we got to teach these young guys how to do this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
I don't know. He as soon as we said that's enough, poof, he was gone.
That was it. I was out of there to go back, sit in my chair.
Well,
He claimed he had a class to do, but we understand.
Yeah.
Sam says, I thought it was 7, not 7:30. Okay.
What?
I'm just reading notes. Fantastic Nerd says, apologies for being late. Who's that?
I don't know.
Fantastic Nerd.
That's YouTube, huh?
Yeah.
No, Fantastic Nerd is Lily Frucci.
Oh, the Langleys are here. Who is it, Patty?
Lily Frucci.
Oh, Lily. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Hi, Lily. And then The Langleys were on. Good to see you. Bruce Carroll said he made it. Teresa Benson said hello. Thank you all for signing on in the chat on YouTube so we know you're there. Susan
Yeah.
Stadley. So good. Welcome. Glad you're all there.
Yep.
We had a good crowd tonight, maybe one of our highest.
Mm-hmm.
So they all tune in to see Sam. So I
Yeah,
love
right.
that.
And we got done early. It's 8 now. It just turned 8 o'clock.
Yeah. And no one needs to notice that, but we did get done early.
We did. Yes.
What?
It's a record.
All right. Anybody else got anything else they want to share? Ann Hafer? What's for dinner, dear, when I
She
get home?
shrugged her shoulder.
Hamburgers.
All right.
Jeff looks like he's ready to say something. He's
Jeff,
he's
go for it.
unmuted. He's leaning forward.
Uh-oh, here it comes.
Now he's got to lean to the left so we can see him. Oh, there he is.
Yeah. Nice picture on the wall, Jeff.
Thanks.
Jeff, you're active in the chat. Give us some wisdom before we go.
I already gave it all to you.
Oh, you sent it to me privately. I see now. Okay.
Jeff
You covered it all. I mean, you ended up getting back to, in fact, Ann Hoover, I think, even said it back by picking your battles with certain things with people.
Yep.
There's a lot of things out there that people think are deal killers that they have to talk about and wrangle with in the church and outside the church faith. And so, is it part of the work or the work? Is it part of the work, the worship of the plan of salvation? You need to talk about it and get it worked out.
Yep.
Especially those in the faith. And if it's not in those areas, then there's a lot of things you need to let go into Romans 14. And you gave a few examples, and I gave a few of them to you privately. And there's a lot of them. They're a lot longer than what I think we think they are. And your tattoo and what we dress and how we wear our hair and what movies we see. And there's a huge list of personal things. And then there's another list of things in Scripture that are a matter of judgment. We talked about that in elder qualifications. We've talked about that in, a plethora of stuff. So it's covering that. There's a lot there.
And going back to what we said at the beginning, it's just the classic advice that we've heard since we were kids, like think before you talk. And it's the same thing when talking about spiritual things, like think, is this, especially when you can sense, because we can sense sometimes when we might strike a nerve or this could cause the conversation to kind of go bad quickly. And ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth, possibly discouraging this person? And the thing is there are times where it's worth having difficult conversations. It really is. But I guess it goes back to like what you said. It does come back to wisdom, I guess.
It's not going to build them up.
Yeah.
And that's why timing is so important in the person. So go to Luke 12, about verse 44, 45, right? The parable there, Jesus is talking to the servants and their different levels of punishment and their accountability. Philippians 3, accountability, opportunity, responsibility, timing, where somebody's at in their walk as a Christian. It makes a lot of difference.
Yeah.
Good.
All right.
Well, again, I'll announce Friday we have Buck Barrett on, and we're going to be speaking about evangelism. His conversion story is amazing. We'll share that, and he's excited to come on. So we'll send an announcement out Friday morning or Thursday night as well. All right. Love you all. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Goodbye on YouTube as well. We'll see you all.
Bye.
Bye.